You got better. And people started leaving. That's the part nobody warns you about. Not the self-help books, not the therapists, none of it. They tell you healing feels like relief. Nobody tells you it feels like an exodus. The friend who called every Sunday now takes 3 days to text back, if she texts back at all. Your mother goes quiet mid-sentence when you say something she doesn't recognize coming out of your mouth. The people who swore they loved you exactly as you were started backing toward the door the moment you became more of what you actually are. You've been calling this loss, lying awake at 1 in the morning, replaying the last conversation, hunting for the sentence where you ruined it. There isn't one. And here's the line I want you to sit with before we go any further, because it's the reason people quit watching things like this halfway through, right when it stops feeling comfortable. Some people never loved you. They loved how easy you were to control. Carl Jung knew that a century before anyone had language for it. He knew the loneliest stretch of becoming yourself isn't a malfunction. It's the process working exactly as designed. I'm going to walk you through why, but stay past the part where it stops feeling good. That's exactly where people click away, right when the truth stops being comfortable and starts being useful. Before there's peace, most of what you built gets torn out first. That's not a metaphor. That's the order of operations. You don't get to keep the structure you built to survive and just repaint the walls. The foundation comes out, which is why conversations that used to be effortless now feel like static on a bad line. You open your mouth to say the agreeable thing, the thing designed to keep everyone comfortable, and it doesn't come. Something truer comes instead, and it's far less convenient for everyone at the table. This is why people you've known for a decade suddenly feel like strangers wearing familiar faces. Same voice, same face across from you. But you can feel the distance now, the way you feel a draft before you ever find the open window. And your family will start saying it carefully, almost like an accusation. You've changed. They're not wrong. They're just describing something they can't see the shape of yet. Because what they're witnessing isn't you becoming someone different. It's you becoming the person who existed before you learned it wasn't safe to be him or her. So here's the question underneath all of this, and I want you to actually sit with it instead of skimming past. What if the people pulling away were never in a relationship with you at all? What if they were in a relationship with a function, the one who fixed things, who listened without needing to be listened to, who never brought a problem into the room that wasn't already someone else's? When that function goes quiet, so does their sense that anything is still there. Not because it was fake, because it ran on a transaction neither of you ever said out loud. You'll want to look away from this next part. Don't. Because here's what makes this different from every other video telling you that healing is hard. I'm not going to tell you it gets easier and leave it there. I'm going to tell you exactly which relationships are built to survive this and which ones were only ever renting space in your life. Think about the last time you canceled on someone and actually meant it. Not the polite excuse, not the rescheduled coffee you both knew would never happen. The real cancellation, where you said no and didn't soften it with 3 paragraphs of apology. Remember what their face did. Some people recovered in under a second. Some people never quite did. That reaction told you something true about the relationship that years of pleasant conversation never could. You've probably been collecting evidence like this for months without naming it as evidence. The unanswered text that used to get a reply within the hour. The invitation that quietly stopped coming. The relative who used to call you first with news and now you hear about it secondhand. None of that is random. It's a pattern, and patterns don't lie the way people sometimes do. So before we go further, ask yourself something and don't rush the answer. Who in your life has already started the slow fade? And what did they lose access to the moment you stopped being available on demand? You didn't choose to become agreeable. Nobody sits a child down and teaches them how to be easy to keep around. You learned it the way you learned to flinch. By getting hurt once, noticing the pattern and adjusting before you even knew you were adjusting. Warm enough to be needed, neutral enough to never become a problem, useful before anyone asked if you were interesting, pleasant before anyone asked if you were honest. You held that setting for years through friendships, through family, through relationships that rewarded you every single time you shrank a little further to fit inside them. And eventually it stopped feeling like a performance. It started feeling like your personality. Jung had a name for this. He called it the persona, not a lie exactly, more like a costume put on so early you forgot it wasn't your actual skin. Here's what almost nobody tells you about it. You didn't choose to put it on, and you won't consciously choose to take it off either. It just starts fitting worse. Relationships grew around that version of you like vines on a trellis. Not around you, around the shape you held still long enough for something else to attach to it. Healing bends the trellis, and not everyone wants to witness what grows there once it does. Because here's the part that stings. Some people, if they were honest with themselves, signed up for the version of you that never pushed back. The one who absorbed more than her share of blame. The one who apologized first, even when the apology wasn't his to give. The one who could be counted on to adjust again and again so the relationship never had to. When that version starts disappearing, it doesn't register to them as growth. It registers as loss. Their loss of a person who made their life easier by making yours smaller. Watch what happens next time you're at a family dinner and you don't feel the silence the way you used to. Watch the exact discomfort that crosses someone's face when you don't rush to smooth over a disagreement, when you don't apologize for existing in the space you're taking up. That discomfort was never about you. It's about a role sitting empty at the table and nobody quite knowing how to fill it now that you've stopped playing it. Some will adjust. Most won't even try. Not because they're incapable of loving the real you, because loving the real you was never the deal they thought they signed. Think back to the earliest version of this. A classroom, a family gathering, a moment where you said exactly what you felt and watched the temperature in the room drop. Nobody had to punish you twice. Once was enough. Your body filed the lesson away before your mind even had words for it. This costs too much. Don't do it again. And you didn't. Not because you were weak, because you were paying attention, the way any smart small person pays attention to what keeps them safe in a room they can't leave. That's not a character flaw. That's a survival strategy that works so well you forgot it was a strategy at all. The tragedy isn't that you built the mask. The tragedy is how long it took anyone, including you, to notice you were still wearing it decades after the room that required it stopped existing. Say it plainly, because softening it doesn't help you. Some people never loved you. They loved how easy you were to control. Not cruelly most of the time. Usually it just looked like comfort. The unspoken agreement that you would always be the one who understood, who forgave fast, who never took up more room than you were allowed. The moment you stop being predictable, the moment you say the true thing instead of the easy thing, some people don't experience that as you becoming more yourself. They experience it as a malfunction in a machine they built their whole comfort around. They'll reach for words like different and harder to talk to and not like you used to be. What they actually mean, if they were honest, is that you no longer perform the function their comfort was built on. And notice something. The discomfort almost never shows up as open conflict. It shows up as distance, a slower reply, a canceled plan, a conversation that used to run for hours suddenly running dry after 10 minutes. Nobody announces they preferred the mask. They just stop showing up for the face underneath it and let the whole thing end by attrition instead of an honest conversation. That's not weakness on your part. That's an answer. It tells you exactly how much of the relationship ran on you being available and how little of it ran on you being known. You cannot be fully known by people who only ever met your outline. Somewhere in your life right now, there is someone deciding whether the old version of you is coming back. not out loud, not in a conversation you'll ever get invited to. They're running the audit quietly, watching to see if this is a phase or a permanent shift. And depending on what they find, they will either meet the person in front of them or they will fade. Politely, gradually, without ever telling you why. You don't get forever to find out which one they are. And I need you to hear the next part without flinching away from it, because this is the part everyone tries to soften. The ones who need you small are not always strangers. Sometimes they're the ones who taught you the setting in the first place. That's the part that makes this hard to say out loud and harder to hear. It's easy to picture a villain as a stranger, someone with an obvious motive, someone you'd never have let close. It's much harder to admit that the person running the audit on you right now might be someone whose approval you've been chasing since before you could spell your own name. They didn't sit down and plan it. Most people who benefit from your compliance never think of themselves as taking anything. They think of themselves as loving you the way they always have. But love that only survives on your smallness was never love in the first place. It was maintenance. And maintenance stops the second you stop being the thing that needed maintaining. Watch who gets uncomfortable when you succeed without asking permission first. Watch who gets quiet when you stop needing them to fix what you can now fix yourself. That reaction is data. Use it. Picture the dinner table. Someone brings up the same old complaint, the one you've absorbed 100 times without comment. They wait for you to do what you always do, nod, agree, take the temperature down. And for the first time, you don't. You just sit there, silent, not performing agreement, not performing anything. Watch the room. Watch how fast someone reaches for a joke to fill the space you used to fill automatically. That silence is the whole chapter, right there. Because underneath the persona, Jung said, waits everything you were never allowed to be. He called it the shadow. Not evil, whatever the word implies to you. Just unlit, kept out of view so long you forgot it belonged to you. Every feeling you swallowed to keep a room peaceful didn't disappear when you swallowed it. It went underground and it waited. The anger you weren't allowed at 11 years old. The boundary you didn't set at 23 because setting it might have cost you the relationship outright. The ambition you learned to downplay because wanting too much, too visibly, made someone else in the room uncomfortable. The refusal you never spoke because saying no even once felt like it might cost you everyone at the table. When the persona weakens, none of that rises to the surface gently. It comes up the way anything does after being held underwater too long. Abrupt, graceless, impossible to ignore, for you or for anyone standing near you when it happens. You say no for the first time in years, and your voice shakes on the word. You set a boundary and your hands go cold before you finish the sentence. You tell the truth in a moment that used to call for a comfortable lie, and you brace immediately for the room to turn on you. People who only ever knew the agreeable version of you will not call this recovery. They'll call it a personality change. Some will call it selfish. Some will use the word cold, like honesty were a temperature instead of a decision. What they're actually describing is unfamiliarity, and to a nervous system that got comfortable with your old shape, unfamiliar reads as threat. Nobody in your life will use the word projection out loud. They'll just accuse you of becoming someone else. What's actually happening is the opposite. You're becoming someone specific, maybe for the first time in your adult life. You'll be tempted, right in this stage, to apologize for your own honesty, to soften the boundary the second you see a face change, to explain yourself back into smallness because smallness used to be the safe move. Don't. That discomfort in them is not proof you did something wrong. It's proof they're meeting a version of you they've never had to negotiate with before. Go back to that dinner table for a second. The silence you held instead of the usual joke or the usual nod. Somebody eventually broke it. Probably not you. Maybe they changed the subject. Maybe they laughed a little too hard at nothing. Maybe they looked at you like they were trying to figure out who let you in wearing a different face. That moment, small as it felt, was the entire shadow doing its work in real time. Not some dramatic confrontation, not a blow-up, just a held silence where a performance used to be. Most people expect the shadow to announce itself with rage or collapse. Usually it's quieter than that. It's just the absence of the thing you used to do automatically, and the sudden, uncomfortable math everyone at the table has to do without you helping them do it. No one is clapping for this part. That's the truth nobody puts in the caption. There's no applause for the version of you that stops performing. No one congratulating you for sitting alone on a Friday night, finally hearing a thought complete itself without editing it for someone else first. Just quiet. And if you've spent your whole life avoiding quiet, it can feel indistinguishable from disaster. It isn't. Jung called this individuation, the slow, unglamorous work of becoming a whole person instead of a well-managed performance of one. And here's what almost nobody tells you before you get here. It cannot happen in a crowd. It cannot happen while you're still scanning every room for signs that someone's comfort is at risk. It takes solitude without a distraction hiding inside it. Not loneliness as punishment, loneliness as a laboratory. As long as there's a voice in the room agreeing with you, correcting you, needing something from you, you cannot hear your own signal underneath all that noise. Validation feels good precisely because it lets you outsource the question of who you are to somebody else's opinion of you. It's easier to be told who you are than to sit with not knowing yet. Individuation takes that option away from you. You start hearing your own thoughts with nobody else's translation running underneath them. You start noticing which beliefs were actually yours, chosen on purpose, and which ones you inherited because disagreeing with them once felt too expensive to afford. This is where most people quit. Not because the pain is unbearable, because the silence is. Old ambitions stop making sense in the middle of pursuing them. Goals you built a decade around suddenly feel like costumes from a play you no longer have a part in. Values you never once questioned start to look borrowed, handed to you by a parent or a culture or an old fear, instead of chosen by the person you're becoming. For a while, maybe a long while, you will not know who you are. You will only know who you're no longer willing to be. That gap isn't a malfunction in the healing, it is the healing. You'll notice your own opinions start arriving a beat slower than they used to, because for years you trained yourself to check the room before forming one. That delay isn't damage. It's the first sign a private self is beginning to exist again. One that doesn't need consensus before it's allowed to speak. Ask yourself who benefited from you staying small. You already know the name. Sit with that instead of rushing past it. Here's what the solitude actually does. Mechanically, if you let it run long enough. It strips out the borrowed opinions first, the ones you picked up because arguing with them once cost more than it was worth. Then it goes after the borrowed goals, the ones that made sense on someone else's timeline. Then, last, it gets to the borrowed voice itself, the tone you use when you're managing a room instead of just being in one. That last layer is the hardest to lose, because you can't always hear it in yourself. You'll catch it by accident, in a text you almost sent, softened 3 different ways before you sent the honest version instead. In a meeting where you almost apologized for an idea that didn't need one. Each time you catch it and don't do it, the private self gets a little more room to exist. Nobody's going to notice this happening. That's the part that makes it feel like nothing is happening at all, right up until the day you realize you don't recognize your own reflexes anymore, in the best way. Not everyone who leaves you is a tragedy. Some relationships were never built to hold 2 full people. They were built for 1 full person and 1 performance. An arrangement that worked precisely because you kept absorbing, adjusting, translating yourself into something easier to hold than the truth of who you were. That doesn't make the people who benefited from it villains. It makes them people who fit a version of you that no longer exists. You may find yourself grieving people who are still alive, still reachable by phone, still technically part of your life. That grief is real, even when the person causing it hasn't done a single thing you could point to and call wrong. You're not grieving their absence. You're grieving the specific shape of closeness you used to have, back when closeness didn't require you to disappear to maintain it. Their capacity for you ended exactly where your old mask ended, and not 1 inch further. You can try to keep those relationships alive past that point. The price is almost always the same one. You have to put the mask back on, get smaller again, quieter again, easier again, to make the relationship survivable for the person on the other side of it. Some people will do this for years without ever naming what they're doing. They'll call it loyalty. They'll call it keeping the peace. What it actually is, stripped of the language, is a slow return to the exact self they were trying so hard to leave behind. So ask it plainly, even if the answer costs you something. How many of your closest relationships would survive you telling the truth and refusing to shrink? The ones that would survive it are the ones worth keeping. The ones that wouldn't were never relationships with you. They were relationships with your accommodation. Every person who leaves during this process makes room for someone who can actually meet the person you're becoming instead of grieving the person you used to perform. That's not comfort dressed up to make the loss easier to swallow. That's arithmetic. There's a specific kind of grief nobody prepares you for. The kind where the person is still in the group photo, still shows up to the holidays, still texts happy birthday on time every year. And you mourn them anyway, quietly, because the version of the relationship you actually wanted stopped being available a long time before you admitted it out loud. You'll catch yourself doing the math at family events, counting how many real sentences were exchanged versus how many performed ones. Noticing that the conversation only gets easy again the second you go back to managing it. That's not you being ungrateful. That's you finally being honest about a distance that was there long before you had the language for it. Let yourself grieve it without immediately trying to fix it. Not every relationship is a problem to solve. Some of them are just accurate readings of where two people actually stand. Once one of you stops performing closeness that was never mutual to begin with. Individuation is not self-improvement. There's no upgrade happening here. No better version of you arriving to replace a worse one. There's only honesty, arriving late, asking to be let back into a life it got locked out of years ago. You'll be tempted, even now, to look for the silver lining, to wrap this in language soft enough to make the loss painless. There isn't one, and manufacturing it would cheapen what actually happened. Something real cost you something real. That's not a flaw in the process. That's the process working exactly as it was always going to. Healing doesn't add anything to you. It subtracts. It removes what was never yours to begin with. The performance, the appeasement, the careful architecture of being whatever kept you loved by people who only ever loved the architecture. What's left afterward is smaller, in one sense. Fewer people in the room, fewer conversations that used to fill your calendar with obligation disguised as connection. Fewer relationships that required you to disappear a little every time you wanted to keep them. But what's left is also, maybe for the first time in your life, entirely yours. Not curated, not adjusted for an audience, just yours. The hardest part of becoming yourself is watching everyone who only knew your mask disappear, one at a time, without a final conversation to explain it. The quieter part, the part almost nobody prepares you for, is what happens after. You don't miss the mask. You only miss believing, for as long as you did, that it was safe to wear. Jung spent his life studying what happens when a person stops performing wholeness and starts building it instead. He never promised it would be comfortable. He only promised it would be real. And real, once you've had it, is the one thing you can never again talk yourself into trading for approval. Some of the people reading this right now already know which category they fall into for someone else. You know it too. The only question left is what you're going to do about it before the door closes on its own. Nobody's going to send you a notification when it does. There's no ceremony for the last time someone decides you've become too much work to keep up with. It just happens quietly on an ordinary Tuesday. And you find out weeks later when you notice how long it's been since they crossed your mind at all. That's not a threat. It's just how it works. The people who were only ever here for the performance will keep drifting, whether you brace for it or not. The only thing actually in your control is what you do with the version of yourself that's left standing once they're gone. Whether you go looking for a new audience to perform for, or whether you finally let the quiet stay long enough to hear what's underneath it. Jung didn't leave a roadmap for that part. Nobody can. You're going to have to build it the way everyone before you did, alone, in the dark, one honest sentence at a time.